Hey, all right. So I'm going to talk briefly about some of the things I see in Oistrakh and Benny. This video though I'm going to talk about a little bit about the similarities I see, and it's kind of interesting after you mentioned that they were your violinist heroes. I realized that they have so many similarities, and that your musical taste is quite more mature than what mine was at your age. so, um, I mean, even objectively speaking, I'm not trying to flatter you or anything. Uh, put on an objective scale, their charm and way of playing is a bit more mature than some of the flashier players. Very charming. In any case, and they have quite a bit of similarities, like for example, the poise, pacing, and all that kind of stuff. So I'm going to go through some of the things that I find similar and a little bit into how they do those things. If there's anything that you think is I'm wrong about, or I would love to discuss anything that you think I'm wrong about, and also anything you would like to discuss in more depth that either I don't mention or I do mention, and you just like more discussion on that. That would be really fun for me as well. So please go ahead and throw everything at me. Okay, so the first thing, just core. I mean, technique-wise, I mean they both have such great training. I mean our Russian school, and you know, Benny. I don't know his previous teachers very well, but you know, he went through, you know, a lot of Roseanne influence, and so yeah, I mean, technically, just great training overall. Number one thing, basically, they both, despite Oistrakh's very graceful technique, where you know his pinky letting go is not so much of a actual, like for example, it's not the kind of problem that I used to have. You know, I used to just get excited, and with tension sometimes as well, and looseness, a weird combination of looseness and tension, I would lose my grip. With Oistrakh, it's amazing that he always keeps his grip and has this kind of such strength that he can hold things very lightly, and yet it is strong. Part of it must be his natural build. I mean, he's built like a wrestler. He's fat, to put it bluntly, but I also think he's very strong and weighted. And this, and if you've noticed, some people like great dancers who happen to be on the chubbier side. Not so many classical dancers are chubby, but I've seen a few, you know, pop dancers or whatever, hip hop dancers who are remarkably chubby, and they have the same thing. I mean, they have some kind of weird power and looseness to their movements. That must come from just the natural weightedness and softness of their body due to that amount of mass. And Oistrakh definitely has this. I mean, his hold is strong and secure, and yet so gentle. Okay, this is kind of the same idea of when Roseanne or some of the other, especially older great violinists, you know, they say keep your fingers light, and you were thinking, or I'm almost thinking like, oh wow, keep your fingers light. I mean, I gotta put some strength into my fingers to articulate. But then, you know, it's, you know, then later I realize, oh yeah, their hands, their fingers, their conditioning is just 10 times simply stronger than I am. And so what they can do with a light touch, you know, is so much more than what I can do with, you know, like putting strength into my hands and kind of tensing up sometimes, which is very bad. So anyways, I think Oistrakh is a prime example. His right hand, you know, he is great bow hold, secure grip, very meaty, a lot of weight in the bow stroke, right? And same thing with Benny. He has a lot of remarkably core strength in his sound, and that comes from well, you can review the basics of the bow hold and the mechanics of the bow stroke that in the videos I made earlier. But that's the first thing that they're very similar about. They don't rush their bow stroke. They're meaty, full hair, and then they sink with weight, pull down instead of pushing down. Very solid bow stroke. And with their left hand, Oistrakh obviously has fairly meaty hands. Benny has, considering how skinny his fingers are, he has quite nice pads, much nicer than mine, in my opinion. And he makes full use of them. And if you look closely, his pads are, I mean, I don't think they're as big as Oistrakh's, but he definitely comes down at an angle where it's not too pointed. And so for his finger shape, he's getting the maximum padding. This is very important to find that no matter how skinny or thick your fingers are, to find that point, okay? And practice finding that, spend a lot of time. Okay, I'm not just adjusting the intonation, I'm feeling what it feels like, different points of the pad. And even with my skinny fingers, when I play with more of the pad, the sound is just that much more round and beautiful. And both of them do this very well, and I think consciously. So whenever they're vibrating and playing, meaty in both hands, right? The meaty pull, weighted pull, and then the as meaty as possible in the left hand as well. Right, so the sound is as thick as possible. I noticed that both of them, their strings are a little bit lower than what's standard. I got my violin adjusted. Mine used to be lower as well, and that used to help me a lot to get a meatier sound on my Galliana. But right now, somebody recarved the bridge, and they do some great work on it for free, actually. But unfortunately, the strings are high now, and I'm having trouble. So that's something that you might want to consider practically. As you noticed, I immediately have trouble. Well, part of it's the fact that I'm out of shape, right? But even when I'm out of shape, I'm having too much trouble bringing the string down with my pads. Right? So that's something that you might want to consider in order to get maximum efficiency and effectiveness in getting a good meaty sound. So that's number one. Number two is that they both use a nice mix of arm and hand. It's a very natural vibrato, which is developed not just by doing stupid exercises like, right? So it's flat. But actually is developed by listening to and focusing on the music obsessively, like really getting into the music and not caring so much about, what is physically happening. I went through this process. I know that when I obsess over the form of my vibrato, where is it coming from? Yes, I can get a lot done in terms of improving the mechanics, but really vibrato is part of the music. And when I focused on just the sound, how the vibrato should sound, purely on that, I did actually end up with probably that time of my playing, I had the most beautiful vibrato, in my opinion, and I think in terms of the reaction I got from other people, same as well. And both of them seem to be deeply immersed in listening to their sound, like obsessively immersed in listening to the music, the flow of the music. And so that's a completely different kind of advice, right, for vibrato, from the stuff that I've been giving you, where it's talking very much about the practical, physical, and how to pace the progress and all. But they both are focusing much more on just the music, spending time and listening to what it should sound like in their inner ear, inner mind, and trying to create that constantly, comparing the results with the inner sound continuously. Okay. The next skill that they use a lot is portato, right? Very beautifully, they're very gentle and they turn the bow a little to the side, usually, and then they keep the bow relatively fast and light. Right, kind of light and just floating, floating, floating. And I don't think this will be hard for you. It's just that you need to get the sound in your ear and realize that you're just gracefully pulling the bow. And all those bow strokes, the actual tone of your violin must be pure, like the sound of flutes almost, like that kind of purity of sound. And going for that resonance and purity with light, fast bow strokes, the gentle, light, fast bow strokes, is the key to the kind of portato that they use. Yeah, I find like the Mendelssohn, that section, and then the Lala, Symphony Español, second movement, I believe, it goes like this, right? The very the very type of sound that you're supposed to get in that movement is supposed to be a sound like the Mediterranean Sea, like beautiful, sparkling, full of light, and that kind of pure harmonic sound where you move the bow to get ring, right? And that's the kind of sound that their portato often has. So I would go for that. Next, this is kind of obvious. Their pacing is incredible. And I think this starts in the practice room as they think about the music. They focus on the music a lot, so that like even if they have, let's say, a section, let's see if I can remember. That whole section, that's a great section in seeing how people play, because it's very interesting. Something like Heifetz or a lot of violinists, they'll just boom, boom, boom. It's a great opportunity to be like virtuosic and flashy, right? But if you listen to like something like Benny or Oistrakh, they're poised even in that section, and particularly when they go to the next section, right, to the it's very interesting how both of them are not overly emotional, right? They're not trying to be like, right? Trying to be weird, overly emotional, and yet they're not trying to be just like straightforward, right? They actually take time, and there's great poise in their pacing at all times. This is something that if you listen to them a lot, you will start to probably internalize the poetic lilt of their style. Speaking of lilt, their use of slides is, I think, exceptional. The romantic players can often slide very, almost sloppily, right? They'll be like, and keep, sliding, as, very like slimy slides. Both Oistrakh and Benny are so romantic, and yet they keep their slides very pure. So when they're sliding in the bow, they lighten the bow and slow down the bow. So if they're playing a note, lighten and slow it down, right? So it's like a slide is getting ready, and it's almost, you're suspending the sound very gently in mid-air. Slow, slow, and then gentle. And then they gently glide with the left hand. So that was very crudely done. I mean, I'm not very good at it, and I'm trying to talk. But they slow down everything, first in the right hand, and then they slow down the glissando, and depending on how thick they want the glissando, this line to be, as they get closer to the new note, they choose whether they want to start the descent into the note early, right, or later. Okay, so this kind of a lilting, suspended slide is, I think, one of their most beautiful tools that they use quite often, and yeah, it is a gorgeous, gorgeous tool of expression. Now, also with the meaty tone, both of them. And I think Benny gets this from, like, Roseanne talks about this a lot. Benny does it a little more in a human way, I think, the way he applies it to music. But the key technical aspect of what I'm trying to talk about is that they both are able to release the meatiness of their sound in a very graceful way. So they might have all the meat, but they never force the sound. They never, like, you listen to someone like Heifetz or, some these great players, and sometimes you feel like, yeah, they're a little rough. The sound, they're not always roundly releasing, into this beautiful round tone. They are very aware of how to make the violin resonate and not force it beyond its natural capacity. Roseanne, always likes to talk about, violin's on a trumpet. It's not like you can blow harder and get a louder sound. And that's kind of what they do so well, and they resist the urge to push the violin into the realm of, harsh sounds. Like somebody like, let's say, Heifetz or Vengerov, it's a little more intense in their tone, and they would be, in my opinion, people who, again, know how to be very resonant, but are more pushy with the violin technically as well. They use, more, Vengerov especially uses more shoulder and upper arm, trying to, power his way through things. Even gentle moments, he will do it with a lot of power and big muscles. And Heifetz too, he'll stroke that bow and just bam, 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 back and forth, even though he has great bow control. But Oistrakh and Benny do not do this. So as soon as they get to a point where I think they're starting to feel like the tone is, you're starting to force the limits of the violin too much, they only push it, almost pull the sound, right? They're listening, so this has a lot to do with listening. So they're always pulling, but making sure that the quality of sound is always being released. Hence, I think they use a lot of that, meaty pull, as well as a lot of portato, because they love that resonance, pure resonance in the tone. Okay, so these are some ideas. Let me know what you think. This is a very interesting topic, so I would love to discuss more in detail with you. And yeah, I'll talk to you soon. Bye.